All right, howdy folks, and welcome to the first devlog for Gridiron Masters 98. A football RPG set in the 90s with high school, college, and pro football. Whoops, not ready for that. This is just going to be the first devlog, hopefully out of many, and this is just going to be a simple presentation, just an overview of what the game is. For those that are in the Discord, will probably be familiar with this information already, but this is going to be new on YouTube, so here we are. So let's get started. So that is the logo for the game, at least for right now, which I think is pretty cool. So let's talk about what this game is not. Well, it's not Madden. It's not 2K. It's not a stick skills game. You know, it's not your conventional football game like Madden 2K, Quarterback Club, Blitz, you know, all the football games that we're probably familiar with. It's definitely not going to be one of those. It's also not necessarily going to be a sports management simulator, although it might share some qualities with sports management sims. Typically, sports management games they're really numbers heavy, and they kind of border on being tedious, which I don't want this game to be. So while it might share some things in common, it's not going to be something that I think could necessarily be categorized as a pure management sim. One that comes to mind is like Football Simulator. It's also ideally not going to be a chore sim. And what I mean by that is that it's not going to be, if you guys ever played something like NFL Head Coach. NFL Head Coach had some cool ideas, but I think the tasks, at least for me, were really tedious. And so I didn't want to play the game because it felt like doing a chore. And so I don't want that to be the case. It's also not going to be 3D. So the reason for that is because 2D is easier, in my opinion, and requires a lot less assets and animations, and the suspension of disbelief is also less of a barrier in 2D games compared to 3D. Because it is true, if you make a 3D game, you get compared to 3D games, and what games are in 3D? Madden, 2K, Maximum Football, etc. So those are some of the things that this game is not. Now, what is this game? Well, it is going to be a football RPG. So it's going to be a role-playing game. You do play a role. Some of the things that are in role-playing games, like classes, attributes, skills, some kind of law system, alignment, those kinds of things that really try to define characters and what they can do and kind of participate in the world. How's it going, Patrick and Z64? Z64 says, I had a few ideas for a high school only game a while ago. Yeah, there is a game called, I think, Varsity, which is planning on being high school only. I personally don't care about just that particular level of football, but it is going to be included in this game. So next on the list is tactical gameplay. I feel like a lot of football games their sort of strategy isn't necessarily the strategy of football a lot of the time. And that's primarily caused by usually AI. You know, because AI isn't exactly like human behavior. What happens in the virtual football world doesn't necessarily reflect football, and so the tactics of the game change, and because it's arcade gameplay, you kind of end up with easily attainable exploits. And so I'm going to try to move away from that and focus more on tactical gameplay. So ideally there would be decisions that are impactful, having to balance and prioritize scarce resources, things like that I think are more tactical and they require more thought and have greater consequence. It's also going to be coach mode. Coach mode, I mean, it won't be called coach mode in the game because the game is coach mode. So if you don't know what coach mode is in a game like 2K or Madden or NCAA football, coach mode means that you call the plays and you watch the action. You can't control the players. And that's consistent with the football RPG theme, because your character is a specific person in the world. It's not you get to control everything in the world. That's not what the game is. You get to control and see things from the perspective of your character, which is the coach. So you do everything that the coach is able to do, and everything else, goes the way it goes. There's also going to be a vivid football world, and that'll be attained by having the three main levels of football: high school, college, and pro. The game is going to try to bring itself to life to you. If you guys have ever played NFL 2K5, which is, if you play football games, you must have heard of that game by now. And in that game, you had the Sports Center segments, and what that was just it took the information in the game and it presented the weekly highlights and scores and everything, and it presented it to you in the form of a Sports Center segment. And so what that did is it kind of brought the game to life. It helped you believe in the football world. And so this game is going to do that as well, to the best that it can. Also with unique teams, locations, and experiences. So I think one of the problems with, sports games in general, but since we're talking about football, in football games, it doesn't really feel like teams are really that different. Being on one team kind of feels just like being on the other team. There's no real differences. The only differences that you can really see are maybe the logo that's on the screen, or the color of the uniforms and the stadium that you play in when at home. And that's really the main differences that you get from team to team. And so I think that the game is going to try to have unique things, unique variables for each team, so that each team, each location has its own set of characters and characteristics, its own kind of fan base, and different things that you see and hear and experience at different teams. That way, being at one team isn't like being at another. That way you can continue to have, different experiences when you go from team to team. It's going to be focused mainly on roleplay, strategy, story, and sports nostalgia. So for me personally, since it's going to be set in the 90s, it's going to try to replicate that feeling of watching a TV broadcast or watching a game from that time period. And it's going to be 2D, like I said before. Let's see what Z64 is saying. Basically, you'd get a few random freshmen and have to put them through drills to figure out what they're good at. And it was to have varsity and JV rosters for you to set before the season. Okay. Yeah, that's basically like tryouts. And this game is obviously going to have tryouts. They're going to be pretty basic at first, and I don't know to what degree they'll be expanded, but there will for sure be tryouts. So let's move on to the next section, which is game design principles. So the first one is simple mechanics. And this kind of goes back to being a chore simulator. I don't want this game, I don't want you to open up this game and just see tons of layers of UI and all these long tedious tasks, and you have to sort through numbers and sit through coach meetings, in real time, all that stuff. That's too close to a 1-to-1 ratio from real life to a game, and I don't want it to be that way. If you look at some of the PlayStation 1 football games like Game Breaker, Game Day, NCAA 98, for example, those games, partially out of necessity because they were, older on the PS1, they had to be brief. They couldn't be super in depth. They couldn't have tons of complicated mechanics and a bunch of convoluted systems. But if you go back and play some of those games, you'll notice that the way they represent things like recruiting and roster management, stuff like that, were fairly simple. And I think that simplicity makes it inviting. So you open up the game and you might have a lot of important decisions to make that could really derail you or put you ahead. But, actually clicking the buttons and making and manipulating the screen to make the decisions doesn't feel like a chore, Making decisions shouldn't feel tedious or difficult. So that's really one of the first ones that I thought would be important to list. And the next one is impactful decisions. Oftentimes in, let's say, a game like NCAA 14, and basically all of them, if we're honest, it doesn't feel like the decisions that you make are really impactful. And so what happens, it seems like in that scenario, the game becomes sort of an elevator to the top. So no matter what you really decide to do, it might have some effect, but it's not like you can derail yourself. The game is essentially raising you to the top either way. You might get there faster or slower based on what you decide to do, but ultimately the game doesn't really have anything for you to, prevent you from getting to the top. And so in that scenario, your decisions don't feel like they really matter. Yeah, you assign points to recruits, or you pick your plays, or you pick your playbook, and that has some effect, but it doesn't feel like your decisions are really impactful and can really can decide the fate of your career. And so I think drawing from strategy games is a good way to start to resolve that. Strategy games, at least good ones, they make you manage scarce resources. And because those resources are important, if you don't allocate them in a certain way, or you don't prioritize, or you make sacrifices somewhere else to benefit in a different place, if you don't do those kinds of things, you could alter the course of your game, and you will end up being way worse off, or maybe you even lose the game if there's a game over scenario. So taking from strategy games, I think, is going to be very important. So that's the second game design principle. The third one is highly challenging. I want the game to be easy and fun to play and pick up, but very difficult to master. And I don't know precisely how that's going to play out. It's going to take a lot of testing and refining, but that's the goal. I want people to boast about their 8-9 win seasons, like people do boast about their 15 consecutive undefeated national championship seasons, where they're beating opponents 100-0. That to me is just the epitome of boredom. Not everybody agrees with that, but that's where I stand on it. And I don't want the game to feel that way. I don't want the game to feel like it doesn't have anything for you. It doesn't challenge you. It doesn't make you make decisions, or all of that. So challenge is one of the big ones as well. And that's kind of tied to realistic outcomes. I don't want, aside from just the having unlimited undefeated seasons, I also like the idea of having realistic career arcs. So the way, again, I'll use NCAA as an example. People will start at, I don't know, Texas State, for example, one of these small programs. And then in 3 seasons, they're competing for the national title. I understand that, that sort of progression can be fun in a game scenario, but it's not really fun for me personally, because I like to be limited by how much time it would actually take to get Texas State, for example, to compete for a national title. It would take a long time. And so I don't want the game to feel like any team can rise to the top. Technically, any team could rise to the top, but there's you got your bullies that are at the top, and you have teams that kind of ebb and flow in the middle, and then you have a lot of your bottom tier teams. And they all play a different role in the game world. And I think, for me personally, believing in the game world is a big deal. And so if I see Texas State competing for a national championship after year 2 or 3, I kind of check out at that point mentally, and it makes the game less fun for me personally. So realistic outcomes is a big deal. And the 5th one is nostalgic stimulation. So this is a game about retro football. And so it's going to try to instigate that sort of nostalgia. And this isn't going to apply to everyone. People that are younger this may not be as effective on them. But different visual things, sound, like music. The music that you hear right now is library music from the 90s, I think. And it would have been used in like TV programs and maybe sports documentaries. I think the music that you hear in NFL primetime, a lot of that was library music. So that's a big deal with sound, visuals, having like TV graphics from like ESPN and ABC, that kind of visual design language from that time period, from late 80s through the 90s and really the early 2000s. The uniform styles, the logo styles, all that stuff is going to be wrapped up in nostalgia. So those are the main game design principles. This next section is going to talk a little bit about the RPG elements that are going to be in the game. This is just an overview of how things are going to work. So if you're familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, it's like the most well-known tabletop RPG game. But basically, it, like a lot of RPG games that follow Dungeons and Dragons, it will kind of take inspiration from D&D. So there are going to be a number of attributes. Every coach will have these 5 attributes: leadership, personality, management, development, and tactics. And those are going to be your main ratings that will, help you be effective in the game world. Inside of each of those attributes, there are going to be 4 skills, and those skills will help you be effective in the game world in specific instances. If you're doing this one thing over here, you use this skill, and if you're doing something else, you might use a different skill. And so depending on where you want to prioritize, where you think you want to put more development, that's how you're going to build out your character. And in RPG games, building out the character and having multiple ways to build a character is a big deal. And so I'm going to try to have as much of that as possible. That way, you might go into a game, into a career, and you might want to try out a leadership build where you do a lot of leadership things, or you want to focus more on tactics, and you can do that as well. And then you're going to be able to see the different styles and how one might be better in some ways than others, and how they compete against each other. So that's going to be cool. Also, with each skill, there's going to be different categories. And this is something that I lifted from Morrowind. I did change it a little bit, though. So there's a game called Elder Scrolls Morrowind. And the way it works in that game is, if you forget about the attributes for a second, 4 times 5 is 20. So imagine a list of 20 skills, and there's going to be 4 categories. And these 4 categories are right here in, you see my mouse? Yeah. Miscellaneous, minor, major, and specialization. And what that's going to be is each of the skills that you choose to place in each category are going to cost something, or they're going to cost different amounts to upgrade. And they're also going to influence your starting value. And we'll see some screenshots later on that will help visualize this. But just to be quick, imagine miscellaneous skills starting at 5, minor skills starting at 15, Major skills, I think, was 25 or 30, something like that. And I think specialization was 50, and they're on the scale from 1 to 100. And so you get to pick 4 minor skills, 4 major skills, and 1 specialization. Everything else is a miscellaneous. And so that's going to kind of dictate how you choose to upgrade your coach over time. Did I skip one? No. And I did want to implement classes in some fashion. They're not very complex at the moment, but the classes, there's 5 classes. You got a traditional, you got manager, you got emotional, tactician, and developer. And the only thing that classes really do at the moment are they give the character a certain perk, and there's only one at the moment. So for example, if you're a traditional coach, you might get bonuses to fan attendance. If you're a manager coach, you might get bonuses to hiring staff. And the manager coach would really shine a lot more when you get to the head coach level, because if you're a coordinator, you're not hiring staff. So there's different, ways to play that. Emotional coach might get bonuses to team morale and rallying, team morale during games. The tactician coach might get bonuses to their playbook, something like that. And the developer coach might get bonuses to developing players. So when you get to the off-season training, you can maybe get a little bit more XP for your players to upgrade them. So that's just a simple way that classes will be implemented in the game. Give me a second. I should have got a bottle of water. All right, next up. Leveling up, of course. This is kind of an interesting feature. So typically in RPG games, you level up with experience. And that is still the case in this game. But rather than having to accrue experience points, I replaced experience with money. So your coach salary, that amount is the experience basically that you have to spend on upgrading your coach. Now this is going to incentivize getting more money. And it's also going to incentivize not wanting to get fired or sitting out a season, because the more seasons that go by and you're not getting a salary, you're losing years of that income to then spend on your coach skills and all of that. So it's going to limit your ceiling as a coach. So this is a cool feature that I think will be very interesting. And there's going to be different ways you can miss out on a season that we'll look at in a second. So the football world is a different section. The football world is going to have obviously high school, college, and professional football. At a bare minimum, there will be 1,600 high school teams, somewhere around 150 colleges, and 32 professional teams. This should create more than enough of a football landscape to play in. So let's take a look at the high school structure. Basically, each high school has an NFL inside of it. Basically, there's 32 teams per state. And you can kind of think of those 32 teams as like the top 32, 6A or 7A or 8A, whatever that state happens to play. You can think of those 32 teams as those, very top high school teams. And the way the game works now is it's going to be the same 32 cities, but the names for the high schools are generated, and the logos and the uniforms and everything. So while you have the same 32 cities, each time you regenerate the game world, you get new teams essentially. So it feels like there's like an endless number of teams, even though the city names are the same. So 32 teams per state, 4 divisions with 8 teams each. Obviously there's going to be a state title. I don't know if it's going to be 8 or 16 teams, but there's going to be a bracket, and obviously the winner of that wins the state title. And there will be national titles, but it's just going to be kind of how it was done in the old college football days, where they just use some kind of ranking system to name the national champion. The reason for this is because I wanted to have some reusability in like the coach contract code that tracks how many division titles and conference titles, which is what states are, and how many national titles. Rather than having, a bunch of different code to handle that, I wanted to have a consistent structure. So for the sake of that, there are national titles in high school. You just don't play for them. The college structure, this is just what it was last, and I haven't worked on the college structure in a while. But last I had it, I think there was about 11 conferences. Some conferences have divisions and others don't. Every conference is going to have a conference title game, so there's no win or go home formula like in the old days. This may not be consistent with the 90s, but I think it's more exciting to have a conference title game. And this next part with the bowls and the playoff, I think is kind of cool. Again, maybe I'll make this, up to the user. Maybe the user will be able to decide how they want the bowls to work and how they want the playoff to work, or if they even want to have a playoff. That could be done. But as of right now, the way I designed it, after the regular season, the bowl games will be played after the conference title games. But the bowl games, the teams that play in bowl games are not going to be immune to losses. So let's say that, and the reason why I'm saying this is because there's going to be bowl games and a playoff on top of that. The bowl games are not built into the playoff. Right? It's not like the Cotton Bowl or the Rose Bowl are like the semifinal for the playoff. That's not how I have it set up. The way it works is the bowl games have their own prestige, and they're their own standalone championships. But imagine like you can get knocked out of the playoff based on bowl results. So let's say a number 15 team, if there's a 16 team bracket, the number 15 team plays in their bowl game and they lose, and they go below 16. They're out of the playoff. So this is basically to resolve the issue of bowl games not having any meaning. And I know that doesn't affect stuff in the game world because it's not real life. But I think it was a cool, different structure that would be interesting. But again, I might have the option just to play traditional bowl games, or just have a playoff or something like that. But I just kind of want to go over that. The pro structure isn't going to be anything. It's probably going to be modeled exactly after the NFL. You got 2 conferences of 16. The conference titles are built into the playoff, and obviously the championship is the winner of the 16-team bracket. Obviously, it's going to be coach mode, so you're limited to the perspective and abilities of the coach. No control over the players. Now let's go over some of the coach tasks. This is just some of the ones that were off the top of my head that I could think of. Obviously, acquiring players, so that could be like tryouts, recruiting, drafting, etc. Training players, so that's making decisions to increase the skill of their players. Playbooks in the game as of right now. I guess we'll talk about that in a second because I have a slide on it. But you get to design your playbooks. There might be random events that you have to deal with. Maybe you get, maybe you get an offer from an anonymous source to, maybe do something shady, and in return you get a sum of money. And because money is used to upgrade your coach, you may be tempted to do that. So there might be events like that, or something might happen with the players, or stuff like that you have to make decisions on. And based on your decisions, you kind of flesh out the alignment of your character. Are you more traditional? Are you more trendy? Are you more obedient? Are you more ambitious? That kind of thing. Game prep. That would be something like the film room, which all that would be is looking at your opponent's tendencies and seeing where they might be vulnerable to your team, seeing how they match up. Press conferences. Mailbox is like having an inbox, so different characters from the world can contact you and make offers or just do things to increase the immersion of the game. Football cards is actually an idea that I came up with recently. And I don't know why, but I really like this idea where, as another way to make money, football cards are basically going to be like a stock market. So you can open up the football cards menu or whatever, and it'll be football cards of like the professional players, and you can kind of see, all right, this guy looks like he's going to be good, this guy looks like he's going to be good, and so you invest in the card, and it's kind of like a stock. So he might get really good over time, and so the value of that card goes way up, and so you get that money in return. And it's just another kind of a fun way, like a side thing, to make money. Or it could also ruin you if you invest. Well, maybe not ruin, but it might be a waste of money, because you might buy this card of like this highly touted rookie, and then he turns out to do nothing, and so his value shrinks and you lose money. I just think that'd be kind of a fun little side thing to do, and still have it be, football themed. Obviously, leveling up, getting hired and fired from different programs. Let's see what Z64 says. The way I used to do seasons on Sega Genesis is bowl games, and then the top 2 played in a championship after the bowls. I don't know what game you're talking about, though. I do know that some games offered you the option, but yeah. Next one is in-game coaching. So I figured this would be something like, let's say your team morale is down in the game, and you might decide to allocate some coaching points or something to certain position groups or something like that, or maybe it's just a general way to increase team morale in the game, or maybe, boost the stats of certain position groups, something to where you have to make decisions like that during the game. Calling plays, hiring and firing staff, and you only do that as the head coach. Coach accessories, I'm not totally sure how that's going to work or if I'm going to even implement it. Basically, that was kind of my way of implementing like equipment and gear, like in a lot of other RPG games. You can wear different things on your character and it affects you in some way. I have ideas on how that could work, but I'm not totally set on it, and so it's not officially going to be in it, but I may find a way to make it work. Negotiating player contracts, like negotiating and bidding on different players, and managing your salary cap, that kind of thing. Exploring campus and HQ or /HQ. This is another feature where I don't know if I'll be able to implement it, at least maybe not on initial release, but just like players have faces that are built from random pieces, just like teams are built from random pieces, you'd also have like a map that's built from random pieces, and that's maybe you could even walk around in it and talk to certain characters or something like that. I think something like that would be cool. I don't know how useful it would be or what role it would play, but it's a little farther out there as a feature. It's not totally required, but I think something like that would be really interesting and really be able to bring, a program to life if you could, walk around the stadium or walk around the facilities and maybe talk to players or something. So those are some of the things that you'll be doing as tasks. And for all of these things, they're going to be simple. Like, a couple clicks and you're done with it. I don't want it to be like you're just endlessly, dealing with menus just to get one thing done. So Z64 says the game was Bill Walsh and I do the championship game in the play now mode. Okay. I guess, yeah, because the BCS era wasn't until 98, I think. So I don't think they had a national championship game, right? Until 98. I think the first one was Tennessee. And Bill Walsh came out, the first one was in 93, I think. So yeah, that sounds like a fun way to do that. So tactical on-field gameplay. I envision this being more like you take the time to think about where you want to place your players, like formation wise, and the structure of the game is set up to where you can't exploit it the way you can like Madden or even 2K sometimes. Since it's not happening live and it's not relying on, perfect AI programming, or imperfect rather, to provide the challenge. It's the game structure, it's the game rules that provide the challenge and the safeguards against the game being really easy. So no pre-designed plays. The reason for this is because, one, I don't have to sit down and hand make hundreds of plays that I don't even know if they're going to be good or not. And I guess it plays into the play calling system, which we'll get into. So I envision plays, or let's just talk about playbooks. So playbooks are essentially, they're really just groups. It's just a list of formations. So you start off with 8 slots. So those are the 8 formations that you can use in that scheme, let's say. And so on a given play, you would say, okay, I want this formation, and I'm gonna, I'm gonna do an off tackle run to the right, and so you make it to the right, and so then the play runs. And maybe next time you're like, no, I want, my second formation instead, and I want to run to the left this time. So you draw it or whatever. And so I want plays to be very easy to kind of set up real quick. Not a lot of things you have to do, just the basic, run, pass, direction, which gap you attack, I guess, and then at what points you attack the defense on a pass play, which is essentially what routes are. So I want that to take, a few seconds at most, unless you have to really think about it. And so that's kind of how I envision plays to work. The next thing is going to be shared play calling. This is something that I think is an interesting idea, and it would be more realistic in some ways. And so each head coach is going to have their delegation of duties in various areas. One of those is play calling. So for example, maybe you're at a certain team and the head coach likes to call the plays. In that case, you take on the advisor role, which means that you get to say, okay, let's do a pass, or yeah, let's do a pass, and let's make it a medium pass, like a medium range pass. So you give that advice to the head coach, and then the head coach decides the specifics. They're like, all right, but I'll take that advice. Let me pick the formation, and I want this receiver to attack this part of the field and this receiver to attack this part of the field. So the head coach or the play caller does that part. And so you kind of share the play calling duties a little bit. And or if the head coach prefers it the other way around, maybe he wants to say, okay, let's run to the right this play. And so you as the play caller, you have to pick the formation, and you have to make a play that satisfies running to the right. And so that could create an interesting scenario where you disagree with the head coach, or you disagree with the coordinator, something like that. And I think it could be an interesting balance. Or I guess the third option is to be in full control, and that would be you pick the formation, you pick everything. That option would probably only be available for if you are a head coach, because it would kind of suck to be an offensive coordinator and be able to do absolutely nothing. So I kind of have to take that away in that instance. Schemes they would be like spread, pro style, run heavy, you know, air raid, those kind of things. And I think there's only 5. I think the middle one is balanced. And all that does right now is it limits you to certain packages, or it limits you to certain personnel packages. For example, the air raid scheme might be the only scheme that has access to formations that have five wide receivers, for example. And then on the other extreme, the power run or the run heavy scheme is the only one that has access to, you know, 3 men or three men in the backfield kind of formations. So you kind of have to pick those according to your preferences and what your roster, what your personnel allow you to do. And I think that could be an interesting way to force the user to make strategic decisions. There's also going to be game morale. And I think all that will affect is a team that has low morale, they take a penalty to their players' skills. And so you want to keep the morale as high as possible, and the morale will be affected by swings in the game, and you kind of have to try to allocate your resources to keep your game morale up. And maybe that extends into halftime coaching. Maybe there's some kind of halftime mechanic or minigame or something. Another thing is stats and tendencies. And this kind of gets into whether or not the game will happen in real time. The plays will obviously happen in real time, but like the time in between, I don't know if there's going to be a real-time play clock. I'm leaning towards no, or at least making it really long, because you might be trying to figure out, you know, let's say you're on defense and you're wanting to look at your opponent's 8 formations, and you want to see, okay, you know, it's 3rd and 5. What are they calling on 3rd and 5 more often, or, you know, are they going to run or pass on 3rd and 5? So you look at those numbers and try to make decisions based on that. I think that would be really interesting, but it would require more time. And I kind of want it to have, for you to feel comfortable making those decisions and not rushed. So it might end up having no limit in the time in between plays. And so I'll have to get creative on how to deal with the play clock and all that stuff. So that's the tactical gameplay. Before that, let's see what Z64 is saying. So, Quarterback Club on PS2 had a play call system on defense that reminds me of the no preset thing. There was a bar that would tell you if your combination was a run or pass stopping play. Yes, I remember that. I played Quarterback Club probably a couple months ago, but I do remember that you could, I think you could set like different fronts and then different, I guess, coverages, and then it would kind of tell you to what degree it was pass defense or run defense. So I'm thinking more in that vein than just picking a preset, you know, cover 2 or whatever. So let's take a look at the football world. The goal of it is to, as much as I can at first release, to reproduce the feeling of watching a televised football game in the 90s. And this again comes from my love of 90s football and all that stuff. When I was working on the college logos, I would put on like a college game from 91 or 92 or whatever. And I can't really describe why it was so appealing, or the warm qualities of the presentation, or I don't know what it is, but something about it was really appealing. And so I want to try to emulate that, both in the games, like during the games, and, you know, when you're surfing the menus. So I want there to be little short commercials for like fictional companies and brands. It doesn't have to be long. It could just be like a one frame, or animate a little image with a slogan or something, and like a text or voiceover or something, and that would be the commercial, and that's it. And then you might get those in between, like in between quarters or something like that. ESPN style presentation, so the kinds of TV graphics and the general aesthetic of ESPN, I'm going to lean really hard into. And sports shows, like just like 2K5 had Sports Center. I know how I could build something like that. It's not going to be as dynamic with like an animated guy talking to you and all that. Although that would be nice. But the structure of it, having some kind of animation that either has something audible, or at least text that you can read that's quick, and it shows you highlights from games, and it gives you news about what's happening and around the country, stuff like that. So this feature is really going to lean hard into the whole believe in the football world kind of thing. And my favorite thing about 2K5 is actually this feature, aside from the good gameplay obviously, but the Sports Center was amazing. And I think it's because, like, I would almost prefer to just sim the week and then just watch the Sports Center, because it's like a fantasy. I have this little football world on my TV that's stuck in 2004, and anything can happen. The Jets can beat the Patriots, and the Jaguars win the Super Bowl in 2004, and that kind of thing. So having this self-containing but ever evolving and football world that's just like stuck in the 90s aesthetic, to me is very, very appealing. So each level would get a show. If it's high school, it might be called like Friday Night Review or something. For college, it might be called College Game Breakers, or the fictional professional league is called the NFA, the National Football Association. So maybe it's called NFA Game Time, or it might just call it NFA Prime Time or something like that. I don't know. Some kind of name that's reminiscent of the actual shows that we might have watched back in the day. Commercials, like I said, simple little ads, not ads for real products. It would just be purely for the aesthetic of having like a Little Roman's pizza commercial, or to kind of emulate the whole pizza wars of the 90s and that kind of thing. And of course you have the halftime show, maybe even pre-game coach interviews, taped interviews like they had in the 90s. So I'm going to try to do as much as I can. This game is a love letter to football games and football itself from the past. The hard-running offenses, the hard-hitting defenses, and all the football legends. The uniform designs, the logos, the passion. Current progress right now is the high school level does cycle completely through a season. You can keep cycling through them, so there's no dead ends, is basically what I mean. But I'm not just making things specifically for high school. There's a lot of things that are going to be shared with college and professional. So while the high school level is virtually complete, that stuff will be used for the different levels. So I don't know how many thousands of lines of code I've written, but it's definitely in the thousands. If I had to estimate, it would probably be around 30-ish, 40-ish% on the way through. And I don't know if it's going to be, like when I get to 50%, I don't know if it's going to be downhill 50%, like it's going to go faster as I go. Kind of like if you're completing a puzzle, it's really slow at first. But once you get about half of it done, and you get the edges in, you start putting in pieces a lot faster because everything starts coming together and you're less clueless about things. So I don't know if it's going to be like that or if it's just going to be uphill all the way. I'm not sure. But I feel like it's 40-ish, 30-ish% on the finished. My main challenges right now, well, things that I'm going to have to figure out, is on-field gameplay, which is, I haven't even touched that yet, but I have to figure out different ways on how I'm going to do that. And art assets. So I can make the UI, which we'll look at here in a second. And I can make pixel art that looks okay, but I would want it to be very, very appealing to look at. And to be high frame rate and be just pristine pixel art quality. So that would be my preference, but I don't have the money to hire someone at the moment. Z64 asks, so are you thinking about doing FMV stuff like how Madden on DOS and PS1 had? I don't think I could do that because I would need actors and stuff. What I could do is, since I have player avatars, the faces for the characters, I have animations of those faces, of the face parts, and it looks like they're talking or whatever. So I can have their face and it looks like they're talking, and maybe there's like a text box or something to that effect. Maybe it's like a frame of an in-sport, like a in-studio character, and maybe the character's animated and you can see what he's saying or hear what he's saying, something to that effect. Bare minimum, it'll be a talking face with text and ESPN graphics and all that stuff. Bare minimum, it's that. So I want high quality art assets, high quality pixel art, and that's including the field, tile sets, the stadiums. I want to have a lot of different kinds of stadium pieces to have an endless amount of stadium looks and designs, and like I said, the players. So how can you support? Well, you can subscribe to the channel. You can join the Discord server, which I believe should be pinned in the chat. You should be able to see where the Discord link is. Let's see. Should be down there. It should be pinned in the chat. That's the Discord link. If you're watching this after the fact and that link doesn't work, it's also might be in the description. No, it's not. But if you have any issues, get into the Discord, just comment in the video afterwards and I can post it there as well. You can become a patron. I would encourage you to join the Discord first so you could see the constant updates and you could feel confident that this is actually a project that will be completed and is worthwhile to support. And the links for all that are in the description, and you can also you can share the devlogs, you can tell people about the game. Alright, so I think that's it for that. Yeah. So I guess this is the much more interesting part. Let's look at some screenshots. I maybe should have embedded those in the presentation, but this is what we got. Let me switch my view here. Is it this? Yeah. So this is from the Discord. So let's start. I can't move. There we go. So some of these are older images. Let's see. Let's just take this one for example. I don't know if I can blow that up anymore. Hopefully you can see that. This is old because these bar designs are not what they are now. But the general overall style of the screen is. So this would just be formation subs. I don't know what else we got here. Team history I think is cool because. Yeah, is there a better way to? Can I zoom in? Let's see if we can zoom in here. We'll just have to go with this for now. You can go full screen if you need to. I like the idea of having team history. So at least from the point of game creation or world creation, tracking, you know, who's the head coach of a team, what's their record, what do they do in the postseason, maybe even saving their schedule. That way you can kind of look back on your seasons, you can look back on, you know, any team's history, and you can see well, in 1990 they went 9-3. There was their coach. Looks like they won the Holiday Bowl. And you know, looks like they, you know, here's all their scores and all that kind of stuff. And you would set, you know, who's the play caller? Is it the OC? Is it the head coach? Who's the advisor? Who's going to decide scheme? Who picks the depth chart? You know, who takes care of scouting? That kind of thing. So you might, you can create formations. So for example, this is the scheme. Right, here's your playbook, and that's the title of the playbook. It tells you the scheme. Let's say it's pro or pro style, whatever. And these are the packages that are valid for that scheme. So, you know, 1 running back, 2 tight ends, 1 running back, 1 tight end, 2 running backs, 1 tight end. So each scheme has its set of packages that are legal to use. And then you have to go in here and, you know, move around the positions. And then you can look through all your playbooks. You can make as many playbooks as you want. You can make as many formations as you want. But, you know, each playbook only has a certain amount of slots to use. And I think I'll even have it to where you can't switch playbooks in the middle of the season. You have to do it in the off season. So it kind of makes you live with your choices. Same thing with team history. You can see your staff history. So here's Mr. Bob Toledo. You can see where he was, what their record was when he was there, what position he had, what was their points per game, you know, points for what team he was on, and you can see his attributes and his skills. And a lot of these screens have similar design because, you know, why reinvent the wheel? This would be like hiring staff. So let's say you want to get a new offensive coordinator. You would look at who's available at the time. You can see their age, their name, what their last team was, or who their last team was. What do they prefer? You know, they more of a pro style guy? Do they like the air raid? Are they really run heavy? What about the spread? Right now, there's no option football. I could find a way, like, once I get to actually making the on-field component, I can see how the option would work. I don't think it would be that hard, but it's just haven't really put it in the designs yet. And you can see their legacy and prestige. Legacy and prestige are... legacy is like what your results are over your entire history, and prestige is like what is your recent history, your recent success. The legacy is long-term success, prestige is recent success. And that's a cool thing to track and to have affect different things in the game, because maybe you're coached with a lot of legacy, but your prestige is really low. Maybe you've kind of, the wheels have fallen off the cart, so to speak, and you kind of hitting some bad seasons, and maybe that affects you a certain way in the game. Maybe someone who is looking to hire you might prioritize legacy over prestige, or might prioritize prestige over legacy. So, and it's the same thing with teams. Here's a mailbox, which I think is kind of cool. So you get, you know, maybe the players send you letters as well. Maybe they ask you for help, and that changes things or something like that. Maybe you get fan mail or hate mail as well. When there's like issues about discipline or rule breaking or different things like that, you might get letters from conference commissioners or league commissioners and that kind of thing. And then it would show you the letter and who it's by, and got the seal and everything. You might get offers from teams, from ADs in this way as well. So that's the mailbox feature, or the screen. Press conferences are kind of a cool idea, and I decided to have it in the 4:3 aspect ratio, so it's just the square. So it would look something like this. It would take a little bit to explain the way the press conference game works, but basically there's a little mini game that you play in the press conference, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to give as much value, or as much or as little value, from the question, which in this case is 10, to the reporter, and that affects perception, and perception affects different things in the game. And the reason why you might want to keep perception, or might want to keep value from the reporter, is maybe you don't like how it's going to affect your perception, and so you pick a lower value answer, and they might press you or something. And so it would take a little bit to explain, but there is a mini game that you actually play, and you kind of balance things out. It's not just answering actual questions, although it could be, but I like the idea of it being, you know, a strategic game more than just answering questions. The front page is kind of cool. Let's see. Is my restream behind? Let's see. All right. So there is the front page. I think that'd be a cool feature as well. You might get different, like the most valuable story might be on the front page of the newspaper. And so in this case, you know, Seattle wins the Mega Bowl, which is the stand-in for the Super Bowl. You get a little image of the game with, you know, headlines, and there's a score, then there's a logo of the team that won. And you get little, you know, BRSU hires Thompson, stuff like that. And so I don't know exactly what this would affect other than just, you know, it would help you believe in the football world because there's a front page and there's little stories in it and stuff like that. And I really like the really high contrast newspapers, like the 90s and before that. So I think it's a cool design. Of course, you have all your tickers at the bottom with scores and stuff. Team standings, you know, you guys know what that is. Might look at, you know, the results of conference titles. A&M, Baylor. I know the Southwest Conference didn't have a title game, but this was just for the sake of design. Then you might be looking at the bracket for the college football playoff, which I know looks weird seeing it in 91, but you know, there's a bracket and such. In high school, you might see something like this for the division. But number 1 and 2 play each other for the division, which is the district title. So you would see that right there. So here's what upgrading the coach might look like. So there's your miscellaneous skills. That's how much, you know, it would cost. And maybe this is how much money you have. And you would just go through and spend as much as you could. And I don't think money will only be limited to just spending it on upgrading your coach. There might be other things you can do with money. That way you kind of have to decide, you know, where money becomes a really important resource at that point. So maybe you can buy coach accessories with it, all that stuff. A weekly prep. So the film room might be something like this. So you would see the team you're about to face, what their overalls are, what their record is. See some stats here. You'd see where their offense is ranked. You could go through what their current playbook is and look at each of their formations. And again, the playbooks are not these, you know, monster 500 play things. All they are, it's like 8 formations. That's it. So you could see the formations and how often they call that specific formation, what the pass distribution is, you know, how often they run with the QB versus the running back, situational tendencies. You know, on first down, are they going to run? Are they going to pass? And then you can see you know, how often they throw to specific parts of the field, and that might inform your strategy as well. And as far as the field, like when you're setting up your play for the next play, I envision it to where maybe there's like tiles on the field, and there's like specific zones that like let's say your formation was right here, your offensive formation, and then you might decide, okay, this receiver I want you to attack right deep, and this receiver over here I want you to attack, you know, left middle, and this tight end I want you to attack the box, right? So you kind of set it up attacking zones like that. And then as the defense, you kind of have to you know, place your players in different places and all that stuff. So it's more like a chess-like setup, but it's still, you still watch the play happen in real time. And then you would have access to all those stats and everything in the game, so you can make decisions while looking at those numbers. Maybe the main menu of the career of the team looks maybe something like this. You can see, okay, you're 10 and 2, you're number 12, let's say. There's your ratings, your legacy, your prestige, what your current attendance is at the stadium, however much money you have. I don't think there's going to be money, at least not like this, not like a resource that you spend for teams. Because I think that gets more into like the hardcore sports sim area, and I don't want to really do that. I have other ideas on how I could implement, spending that might look at in a second. And then it tells you your last game, your schedule, team, staff, strategy, fan base, coach, mailbox reporters, save, quit, all that stuff. Training, off-season training would be like, you would pick a focus, and a focus is just a group of skills. So let's say you want Mr. Bucky Richardson to be, his composure's been really bad lately, a lot of false starts, maybe even intentional grounding stuff. Composure affects penalties and different things like that. And so you're like, all right, you need to go back to the film room this off season and get your composure up. And so you would put him in the film room, and it would affect composure and football IQ. And maybe Jeff Granger, you would put him in passing, and that would affect stuff like arm, release, poise, fundamentals. Maybe that's like strength and different groups of skills. That way you don't have to manipulate each and every skill of a roster of 50 plus players. You just kind of scroll through, set a focus for each player, maybe even just do it by groups, and then you're done. I don't like the idea of spending forever and ever on a single task. And then you would see your training results. So you put Bucky Richards in the film room, and his improvement in IQ was good, and in composure was moderate. Now the reason why you don't see like +6 in composure is because the game is going to hide their literal ratings and instead is going to show you performance. So let's take this composure rating, which is 26. What that would mean is that out of all the times that the composure rating was checked on the field, it passed 26% of the time. Now that doesn't mean that his composure is a 26. That means that he passed 26% of the time. And the same for football IQ. His football IQ was checked every time he was in a play, and it passed 74% of the time. So what that means is that you don't actually know what their exact number is, but you do see their results. And so that's going to help create that gem and bust phenomena, where it's like, man, this guy is really good, but maybe he was just overperforming. So let's say that Bucky's let's say Bucky's arm is a 50, and he passed his arm check 70% of the time. Let's go to Jeff Granger and say maybe his arm is a 60, but just by chance, his arm his arm rating passed 55% of the time. So you might think, oh, well, 70's more than 55, so clearly this guy's arm is better. Not always. Sample size is going to be very important. So players can overperform, players can underperform. And you kind of have to decide who's who. And the grades, those will not be set by the computer. Those are grades that you can set if you want on your own. So you can give them an A, you can give them a B, a C, a D. And the reason why there's no overall rating is because you may not value players the way the computer wants you to value them. Maybe you value arm at a different percentage, or you value break tackle a certain percentage. So all that's going to be up to you. Tryouts would just be based on certain coach skills. You get a certain amount of reps. And you can allocate those reps, and then you would see how many times they pass their drills, which is kind of how performance works. And they would make your cuts based on that. And let's say you happen to be sitting out a season of coaching, your home office might be something like this. So you'd get your letters from different programs and such. Recruiting, that'll take a while to explain, but basically I know this doesn't make a lot of sense visually, but the way I think it would work is that each state would have fluctuating vulnerabilities to programs of different calibers. So this year, Texas is, 30.5% vulnerable to 5-star programs and 20.4 to 4 stars. And those values change over the course of the seasons. And so you might be like New Mexico or something, and you're like, oh, their vulnerability to 1 stars or 2 stars is actually kind of high this year. Let me try to beat some of these teams and allocate more points to get some of this talent pool. So it's more of a numbers allocation thing. It's more streamlined. I personally think the whole calling individual recruits is kind of a tedious process. I might still have something for that. Maybe you get to handpick one guy in each position, and that'd be like your blue chip that you kind of handpick and deal with. But the bulk of the class, if not the whole class, is going to be taken like that. Contract offers, you get to see the team info. There's your AD. Get to see some information about the AD. Here's your goals, 3 years, salary of whatever. 32 wins. We want you to win the Copper Bowl or whatever and beat rivals, stuff like that. Then you get some dialogue from the AD. And you switch up to professional. Here's a draft prospects. You have to go through and assign. Let's say you have a pick. You have the 4th pick of the first round. Maybe you can assign 3 options. Like, all right, this is our number 1 guy. We want Brett Favre. We'll make Bucky Richardson our number 2, and then maybe we'll get Tommy Maddox at number 3 or something. And then when you actually go to the draft screen, your options, if available, you'll see them there. That way you can easily track who your first guy, second guy, third guys are. Player contracts. You guys know this. Salary cap, length, penalty. Not a whole lot different here. There's a thumbnail image of the draft. So, 35 out of 224. The Seattle Ducks are picking. That's the actual name of the Seattle team in this game. You get your ticker and everything at the bottom. And this is more recent. This is actually inside the game. So the bar might look, or the title bar might look even more familiar. Even have a little CSPN badge up here. But this is actually in the game. The other ones you were seeing were just designs, but this is actually in the game. So when you would first, you created your coach and everything, and you would get to this screen. This would be a high school team. These logos are generated. They just use a certain font with a certain style, and they use the team colors. And then there you got your AD, and there's already a lot of avatar pieces. I'm just going to add more. If you're a patron, you get to add names and add different hairstyles if you want them. LB Coach says, what console will this be on? It's going to be on PC. I have no idea how getting a game on console would work. It's just, that's a whole thing that I just don't want to touch right now. So it's going to be on PC. It's not going to be a really demanding game. So you should be able to run it on your grandma's Windows 7 computer. Any old laptop you get from the thrift store should be able to run this game. So it is going to be on PC, but it's not going to require, a $500,000 gaming PC. And it will have controller support, so you can play it just like you would, any other controller style game. So there's no console plans right now. I don't really have any idea how that would work out anyway. Maybe down the line, but it's PC right now. This off-season screen's a little bit incomplete, but here's Felix. So those would be the graduated players. I'm not sure exactly what would go here. Maybe their height and weight or something. Their plans would be like, maybe if they had enough, like if they had a lot of good performance, it might say like 1A offers or technical college or something like that. It just kind of helps with the immersion and help believing in the game. I couldn't actually put what school they're going to go to or what college they plan to play for if they do plan to go. The reason for that is because recruiting doesn't happen at this point in the game. And so there's no way for the game to know where they're going to go. So if they're probably good enough, it'll just say 1A offers or something like that. That way they're probably going to end up at some program somewhere. So this is the tryouts. And so after you would see your graduating players, you would get to the tryout screen. And all these guys are new. They may not all be freshmen, but they are new to your team. And what you do is you go through them, you look at their results, or you look at their initial results. So as soon as the tryout screen comes up, it's going to have an initial sample size of reps, and that's decided by head coach skills. And then let's say you're the offensive coordinator and you get an additional amount of reps that you can allocate to the offensive players, and that number is also decided on by, or it's determined by your skills. So the better skills you have, the more reps you can allocate, the bigger sample size you can get on certain players, and the more accurate results you'll get. And so if you're the offensive coordinator, you go in and you look at the results and you see, okay, his release is at 71.3%, so his release is probably pretty good. So I definitely don't want to cut him. So you would, you know, he does have the cut icon on this screen, but maybe you don't want to cut him. But you can also see their average percentage. The reason why it has the cut icon is because the head coach probably designated him to be cut because he has a higher average. The thing about averages is that even with a higher average, he may still have lower percentages in areas that you value more. So you kind of have to still look at them. Until you go through the offensive positions, assigning reps, and then you would run the next round of tryouts, which is just pressing a button, and then you would see their next results, and then you would cut the guys you think should go. If you're an offensive coordinator, though, you don't have final say. And so you would make your cut list, and then you would press a button, and then a screen comes up with the head coach's face on it and some dialogue that says, you know, yes, I agree with you, basically, or no, I don't agree with you. And that'll be determined by, again, your coach skills, like persuade, or your personality, your speech skill, stuff like that. So the higher your coach skills are, the better you'll be able to convince characters to do things that you want. And so this kind of creates a little bit of a push and pull with the head coach. Maybe you disagree on who should go and who should stay, and so I think that creates more interest because you don't always get who you want. And that's a simple mechanic, and that already works. You see your needs, how many reps each coach has, and then what else we got here? Is that the most recent? Let's see what we got. Okay, here we go. So here's off-season training. So Mr. Noel Bruce here from Booth Middle School. You would as the offensive coordinator, you can only cycle through the offensive positions. Same for defense. If you're the head coach, you can go through all of them. Well, let's say you're just looking at your running backs here. So this is how many running backs you have. Let's say you want this player to focus on fundamentals, this guy to focus on running, this guy to focus on blocking and receiving, and then you can see, you know, what their performance is so far. And then this development bonus is currently 5.6%, and that's made up by the head coaches, whose is 3.6 plus yours, which is 2. So in this case, Bruno's XP is 166, and his new XP, including this development bonus, is 199. So you again, with with better coach skills, that percentage is going to be higher. So if you're more of a development coach, you're going to have more points in development, and so this percentage will be higher. And so you can develop players faster. And then you can see, in this case, running affects speed, stamina, and ball security. And when you set everyone's focus, you can then see the results, and then it'll say, you know, good improvement, moderate, and all that stuff. So you can have an idea of how much their actual rating went up, but it's not going to tell you what that rating is. And so I much prefer that system than always knowing who's who and never having any doubt, and there being no surprises. So, and I think after training, I think that's it for screenshots currently. Yeah, that's it for screenshots. Maybe I'll show a couple of the team ideas that I had. So this is like Corvallis State. This would be one of the colleges, for example. CSU. This one is completely fictional. Savannah. What else we got? We got the Seattle Ducks. That's always fun. Ypsilanti, I think, is the stand-in for Eastern Michigan. That's West Lafayette. Stanford Barons. Piscataway. Sure you guys can figure out who that is. Columbus State. Charlotte. It's kind of a cool concept with the pickaxe. Amherst. Got Akron here. Statesboro South. So you can see kind of what I'm going for as far as names and all that. The high schools will be completely generated by the computer though. But since I'm making everything, I kind of have to do what I can. Let's see, is that it? I don't think we have anything else. Yep. So if you're not in the Discord, it's pinned in the chat at the top, so you can. This is where I'm most active, but I think there's also a link for Twitter or X. I think I have one. I can add it if you guys want it. There's also a link for Patreon. There is a free tier if you just want to follow there. But I currently have $35 a month on Patreon, and the next goal is $100. And there's different tiers on there, so you can just be at the bottom and get your name in the game, get your name in the credits. You can go up and get you get custom avatar pieces made if you want a certain hairstyle to be in the game, or some glasses or a hat or something like that. I can do something like that. Let's see, I could actually, can I pull this up? I think I can. I don't think I have it up on this other computer though. But basically there's a couple different tiers on there, and it does at some of the higher tiers. At some of the higher tiers you get exclusive looks, like at the code and stuff sometimes. You can even design a team if you want, and I'll, do my best to build that into the game. So there's different things on there that you do get, but it all goes to helping this game come out sooner. So if you believe in the game, I do. It's been 10 years in the making. Not this specific run, but I first had the idea about 10 years ago, and I've been trying to do that ever since. I've been on this run for about a year or so, and it is the run. It's gonna get finished. Just depends on how quickly is all. Ideally, I'd want development time to be no more than 2 years, and I've already spent about 1. So hopefully I can still stay within that time frame. I think that's about it. If you have any questions or anything, you can go ahead and sound off now. Z64 says, just got into the Discord and it sounds like there's a USFL style league too. Yeah, for some of the higher tiers in the Patreon, you have the ability to create a team, and that team will probably be in the I think I have it named the Continental League right now. But there's options, and there's a lot of ways for you to have influence over the game and help the game move forward. But I mean, that being said, I think that's gonna do it for me. Unless there's any questions here at the end, we'll go ahead and call it here. I wasn't planning on this being an hour and 47, but that's what we got. Any questions? Let's see. I don't think so. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, I think that's gonna do it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Feel free to leave comments about any future questions or anything, but I think that's gonna do it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will be seeing you guys in the next one. Don't forget to share the game. All right, now I'm leaving.